Hi, everyone. Welcome to What's Happening. I'm Connie Ryan, Executive Director of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, and I'm really glad that you have joined us today. It's been a while since we've done a What's Happening, and so I'm really glad to be back and to have you back with us as well. What's Happening is usually weekly conversation that we have on just a broad spectrum of issues and have leaders that have that conversation with me. And if you are on Facebook or if you are on YouTube, you can post questions in the comment section there, and we'll try to get to those before the end of the conversation. But, you know, public schools have been under attack. We know that for several years, but particularly this year, and they have been really at the epicenter of the culture wars that really centers on anti-racism and anti-science and so many different pieces. And there is a group of parents, well, there are a lot of parents, I should say, but a particular group of parents and advocates that who have been fighting back and using their voices and standing up for what they know to be best practices and best conversations that their children should be and they want them to be part of. And I'm very excited to have my friend Luana Nelson-Brown with us, and she is a co-founder. I have to make sure I get this right, Luana. Co-founder of Johnston Parents for Equity and Anti-Racism, or known as J-PEAR also. And
Yeah.
welcome to What's Happening again. I know you've been on before. Glad to have you back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll be here every day if you want me to. I love being
We always have great conversations, and
we do.
yeah. And so tell us a little bit about J-PEAR, Johnston Parents for Equity and Anti-Racism, and kind of how it got started.
Okay, now that's a story. So J-PEAR is made up of parents of color in the Johnston School District. And it actually started in 2020 when our school district created a strategic plan, and they put equity as a part of the strategic plan. Um, Actually, the district reached out to me because I do anti-racism trainings for a living, and asked me to put together a proposal for our district to help move the district toward being an anti-racist, equitable, and inclusive district. So I joined with two other Johnston parents that I also know do this work. And together we put together a big proposal for the district. Now, when the district asked for this proposal, I'm sure they were simply looking for a few trainings, and that's it. But we gave them a full on, multi-year proposal. And in order to do that, we did research. And so we held focus groups with students, parents, faculty, and staff of color to really get at what are the real needs and the lived experiences of the families of color in our district. As we were doing those focus groups, we called ourselves Johnston Parents for Equity and Anti-Racism, and people joined our focus groups that way. So J-PEAR really started as a collection of focus groups for families of color in the district to lend their voice to the district to move towards equity and anti-racism.
And that is awesome. And I would expect nothing less of you to be full on, to go in and to do the real work that really needs to happen rather than just that surface piece. And so it started as the focus groups. So what has it morphed to? What is the current mission and goals of J-PEAR?
Sure. So what ended up happening is out of those focus groups, parents and students and families of color basically formed an alliance. It became more of a almost support group for us. So during those focus groups, we made connections. We started to talk to one another more often. A group of parents started walking together, walking the Johnston trails together. And we started to become friends and talk about the issues in our district now. So it really was not supposed to be a formal thing. It was really more of a friendship, support, lean on each other and assist each other when issues came up. And the district itself has morphed so that it has also morphed us. So one of the first things we did as a group was to hold a rally for the hiring of Lewis Fountain, who is our equity coordinator. So it quickly has turned into ensuring that equity and anti-racism continues to happen in our district. Sorry, I got a notification. Continues to happen in our district, and our district moves forward with the voices of marginalized communities at the center. So that's what the district started out to do. Now our mission is to ensure that our district continues to do that, to put marginalized communities at the center of our district, because we know when we do that, then we find solutions that work for everyone. So that's really the mission of J-PEAR. We're a group of parents we're committed to equity and anti-racism, and we're committed to our students. So first and foremost, our students are the clients or constituents or consumers of the district. Their voices hold the most power, so we support our students, and we support our families of folks from marginalized communities. And that's how you reach equity, right? That's how you reach true equity. So that's what we are now. So we do everything from attend school board meetings. We helped form an equity committee on the school board, which was actually part of our proposal. The proposal, by the way, was not accepted by the district, but we are seeing pieces of it being implemented anyway. So, so as they're being implemented, we have to stay on task and jump in to make sure that they're implemented correctly, because obviously we didn't give the roadmap on how to implement the things in the proposal. We just mentioned the topics in the proposal. So as we see them implemented without us, one of our major goals is to make sure that those things are implemented correctly and don't cause harm.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you kind of how it was accepted, and we're going to get to this fall and kind of what has happened this fall in school board election. But prior to the school board election, so the plan was not implemented, was not voted on, but pieces are being voted on, are being used by the district. Are you, prior to this fall, were you happy with some of the progress that the district was making?
I had mixed feelings. There were some things that were very good. In 2020, the district didn't have a Black History Month program at all, and had no plans on implementing one, right? In 2019, one of our Johnston parents named Robert Morris, I hope he's okay with me using his name, spoke out about the fact that there was no Black History Month program. And that actually is what sparked the district to ask for a proposal and that sort of thing. So come 2021, we did see Black History Month programs being implemented in all of our schools. That was a positive thing. We did see the hiring of Lewis Fountain. They did go ahead and hire him as our district's equity, inclusion and belonging coordinator. That was a good thing. There's some other things, however, that have been moving way too slowly and not been implemented exactly as parents of color would have liked to have seen them implemented. So there's a give and take there. There's a give and take. At least that's where we were until this last school board election.
Yeah, and so then kind of bringing folks up to date. A lot of folks know that there's been a lot of debate in the public square, in the legislature, et cetera, around race, racism, anti-racism. It's been kind of couched as in the terms of critical race theory, which we know is not really a real thing, but that's what it's commonly referred to. And you're oftentimes on one side of the issue or the other. We saw House File 802 in the Iowa legislature. But then we came to the fall elections and local elections in the off year. particularly school board races, were very contentious. A lot of debate and conversation around schools, public schools, having curriculum and other programs around anti-racism and race. A lot of debate around how history is taught, and whether or not teachers can use particular books, all of this kind of debate. And in Johnston, it was particularly heated because you had 3 school board members running kind of as a ticket. So talk a little bit about that and the election season itself coming up to the election in November.
Man, it's funny because it feels like that was 2 years ago. And it was just in November. It was just through the summer in November. So so here in Johnston we had 3 seats that were open. Our board's chair and vice chair, those seats were open, and 1 other seat was open. And so we had 4, 5, 6, 7 candidates run for those 3 seats. 4 of those candidates were more liberal, supported the district in its move toward becoming an anti-racist and equitable district. And 3 of the candidates appeared to not hold those same values. The 4 candidates were inclusive of the board's current, back then current chair and vice chair. And then 2 Black women were also running, one of which is a member of a core member of J-PEAR, and the other is also a member of J-PEAR. So in essence, what ended up happening is the votes were split by the 4 candidates. If you look at the total votes collectively, the 4 candidates that stood for equity and anti-racism actually received the most votes. Those votes were just split amongst the 4, which allowed the 3 candidates that basically ran on 1 ticket, which was very strategic and smart because it worked, to win. Now, the issue is that here in Johnston, if you really broke our election down to its most simplistic form, it was no longer a race about traditional school board topics. It became a race for or against equity. And the team that signed the 1776 pledge, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit later, made a clear distinction that equity, the way we know it and the way that marginalized communities need equity to happen, is not their goal. So they signed the pledge, and they were backed by a national organization, the 1776 Action Committee, I think it's called, that helped them with their campaign. And ultimately they won. Even though their ideals that are supported by this pledge are not what the majority of people in the district are in favor of, obviously, because they did not receive the majority of votes in the district.
Yes. Yes, you did a great explanation. I know it is, you could talk for a couple hours about what happened in Johnston over September, October particularly, but so there's the 1776 pledge. We know that also our governor has signed this pledge. I'll just say that out loud.
Correct.
There are 3, when you go onto their website, if you just Google 1776 pledge, you'll find it. And there are 3 pledges, and one is for citizens, another is for elected officials, and the third is for teachers and educators. And they're all very similar, but they're just kind of targeted for different people. And so there are some bullet points about things, their understanding of the United States and history and those kind of things, and several bullet points. And the pledge itself is, I'm just going to read a little bit of this to get everybody on the same page. So, restore honest, patriotic education that cultivates in our children a profound love for our country. Okay. Promote curriculum that teaches that all children are created equal, have equal moral value under God, our Constitution, and the law, and are members of a national community united by our founding principles. Third is prohibit any curriculum that pits students against one another on the basis of race or sex. And then the fourth of the pledge is prevent schools from politicizing education by prohibiting any curriculum that requires students to protest and lobby during or after school. So this is the pledge, and kind of put it into context for us.
I would be happy to. I'm actually going to start from the bottom up, like from that last bullet you just read. That's one of the bullets I think that is most important for people to understand and grasp. Which, because all of it on the surface, if you aren't informed in what is important to marginalized communities, if you aren't informed on what racism and white supremacy actually are, then that pledge sounds pretty harmless. But in fact, that pledge is one humongous dog whistle that that is quite harmful to students and families of color. Starting with that last bullet, can you read that last one again?
Yeah.
Number 4.
Prevent schools from politicizing education by prohibiting any curriculum that requires students to protest and lobby during or after school.
Right. So let's start there. This pledge in itself was taken from or in support of the 1776 commission that Donald Trump implemented when he was in office. It is the same commission that our current president, Joe Biden, denounced and dismantled the moment he got into office, because that commission was he said, was inherently racist. The commission actually had put out a 1776 report, and that report was criticized by historians as being not truthful. There were not facts in that report. Our president called it inherently racist, and it was. And it was basically all put together as a result of attacking the 1619 Project. And the 1619 Project was created actually by a native Iowan, ironically, Nicole Hannah-Jones. And all it does is details. 1619 is the year that the first slaves arrived in America. So instead of teaching history from a starting point of the year 1776, the 1619 Project takes us back to 1619, when African Americans, our history started in this country, and then goes on to detail the contributions of Black Americans in the country from 1619 up until now, which is extremely harmless, and it tells the truth. It also allows us to be seen in the way that we haven't been seen in history. So the 1776 Pledge, Report, and Commission are all an attack on the 1619 Project. So I find it interesting that that fourth bullet starts out with not politicizing education when it's based on a political issue.
Right.
So in essence, this pledge does politicize education. And because it erases an entire group of people, not just African Americans, but other marginalized groups as well, it actually causes protest in response to it. So you can start with that fourth bullet and understand how this whole pledge is a dog whistle. And there's a lot of gaslighting that is inherent in that pledge, just by looking at that fourth bullet alone. Some of the other things in the pledge basically hold true to the same. That is what I just gave you, was the core of the problem of that pledge, and the rest of it just follows suit. It sounds good on the surface, a patriotic education, but we know that patriotic education has been used as a term to erase marginalized folks from history. So that's a dog whistle as well. And then there's, at the bottom of that pledge, what's that one part that
Yeah. So one of the other pieces of the pledge is promote curriculum that teaches that all children are created equal, have equal moral value under God, our Constitution and the law, and are members of a national community united by our founding principles. What do you have to say about that?
It sounds good on the surface
Right.
until you unpack that a little bit and understand that, our founding principles, when they were written, all men were not created equal, right? And so that is it's contradictory in itself. It would be great if all of those things were true, but they are not, unfortunately. And so if we strive to teach that those things are true, then we're not teaching truth in history, which is what that pledge claims to want to do. So, by saying we're going to uphold our founding fathers and our founding principles and teach that all children are created equal, we are not teaching the truth, because we know when those principles were developed, we weren't created equal. And in many ways, equality is what we're still, well, actually equity and not equality is what we're still fighting for. So, things are not equal in our country. And so we're doing a disservice by upholding that. And we're basically just sticking our heads in the sand, and we're erasing a whole subsection of people, including women, who were also not counted.
Right.
And our founding principles were made, women were not a part of that. So we're also erasing women in that pledge.
So if you dig down deep into all of this, like the whole piece of the 1776 pledge, in your opinion, Luana, what is the harm that it does, particularly to children of color who um, are impacted when it's signed by elected officials like school board members who don't want to talk about diversity, who don't want to talk about racism, and don't believe in equity? What is the harm to the children who are actually impacted in the school district?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. There's a couple of things that are extremely concerning for our students. One, it erases marginalized groups and women from history, and it erases us from the curriculum, and anytime you're erasing people, you're dehumanizing people. And if you take psychology or sociology 101, you understand first day of class that dehumanization is the first step to violence. So, as the executive director of the Homicide and Violent Crime Coalition, I'm deeply concerned that as we start to tell people that their voices don't matter, tell students that their community's contributions to history don't matter, we will also start to see an increase in violence in our students' lives and in our families' lives. This holds true. We're seeing an increase in violence right now in Iowa and across the country. A lot of us we understand that this is related to COVID. COVID brought a lot of fear, a lot of tension, a lot of uncertainty. And this is exactly what is happening in our districts. A lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of distrust. And so, if I follow data trends, we're likely to see violence erupt in our schools because of this. So it's really extremely dangerous. And it not only erases marginalized communities, but it also says that their lives don't matter. And anytime you're doing that, you're not only teaching marginalized communities that they don't matter, you're also teaching other communities that those communities don't matter. And so you're inherently training not just victims of violence, you're also training perpetrators of violence. So my greatest concern is that we are going to see students who never learn the truth about not only history, but current events, and how people face barriers. Certain groups in our country face barriers to success. And so if we never learn it, we'll never fix it. And students at this age, especially like middle school age, this is a formative time. So some of their core values are being formed right now. And are we okay with letting students develop core values that are harmful, potentially violent, and that will continue inequity as we see it today. So it's layered with a lot of harmful messages. And I will tell you that already we've got, our coalition has received some um, phone calls from students where they've heard teachers say inappropriate things based on race in our district. So it just gives license for folks to be insensitive, to say harmful things. And we'll start to see an increase in bullying. And we're already starting to get some of those calls, not just from students saying things, harmful things to students, but also teachers being overheard saying harmful things. And then there's no accountability for it. So it's very, very dangerous for our students.
That is gravely concerning. And so talk a little bit about then kind of bringing back to J-PEAR. And I know that there was a march soon after the November election of the school board members, not to protest that they were elected, is my understanding, but to protest that they signed the pledge, is my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about what J-PEAR is doing now with that march, and then other actions that you're taking to educate the public and the school board about these issues.
Sure. So yeah, we had that march, and you're absolutely correct. And this march was actually organized by the students themselves. So the students of CORE stands for Community of Racial Equity, has came to J-PEAR as parents and said, what they wanted to do. They wanted the newly elected school board members to denounce that pledge that they signed. No one is protesting them being elected to the school board. We believe in fair elections. They won that election fair and square, and no one has a problem with that. But we do have a problem, and students, first and foremost, have a problem with that pledge being signed by three people who hold the greatest amount of power in their lives. So as parents, we stood behind our students, and we will continue to stand behind our students. And as school board meetings happen, there's one happening on December 13th. We will continue to speak up and hold our students' request at the forefront. And their request is that those three candidates denounce that pledge. There are some other things that we are working on, because there are other things we have to fight as well. For instance, there were two books that are a parent has requested be banned from the district. Both of those books are written by and written for communities of color. The Hate U Give, which is African American, and The Absolute True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. It is not lost on us that these are both directed at communities of color. Of course, what they're using about these books is obscene language. These books were both written in the first person. They're written from the viewpoint of the main character, which is in both cases a young, school age person, and it uses the language that our students use. So a lot of us feel like this is another dog whistle, and it's really an attack on families of color once again. So this happened immediately after the three school board members who signed the pledge were elected. So this is a clear example of what we were worried about when those three took office, because right away we start to see what appears to be an attack on students and families of color. So we will continue to, like at this school board meeting coming up, there will be discussion about those books. I understand that The Hate U Give has now been dropped because of protests at the reconsideration committee hearing. It's a whole thing. Um, they've dropped that book, but they are still challenging the absolute true diary of a part-time Indian. I'm sorry if I misquoted the title of that book. So you will see J-PEAR in action at our next school board committee meeting. And there are some other things that we have in the works as well. Several of us are members on the school board equity committee. And so the equity committee, when it reconvenes, will have some things for the equity committee to do as well. And we're still continuing to support one another. If there are any parents that want to get involved, they can go to the J-PEAR Facebook page. And we're also creating now a coalition of other parents in other school districts, because it's not just us in Johnston. Waukee is seeing this, Ankeny is seeing this. And so we are now having other parents from other districts call us to talk about how to organize and how we can all stick together. I know the focus is usually on Des Moines, but there's a huge attack in our suburbs as well. So we are now banding together to talk about these issues across the metro.
Yeah, and so if a parent is concerned, whatever district that they're in, and we go statewide, so this could, be a conversation in another part of the state as well. If they were seeing issues in their school district, whether it is the 1776 pledge, just language that's being used by elected officials, banning of books. We know that we've seen a huge rise in banning of books or challenges to books. And we're actually going to talk about that next week on what's happening with guests. And so I'll tell folks about that in a minute. But if you had to give some advice to parents of one or two or three things to focus on or to do, what would your advice be to parents or concerned citizens in a district?
Well, I would say, number one, you've got to come together. This doesn't work with one or two parents just speaking out and saying something. Apparently, it does work for the other side that way, because our book banning right now was brought up by one parent. Well, I guess two. It's a couple, and they have gone all the way through the reconsideration committee, all the way to the school board. And this is the opinion of two people. But on our side, you have got to band together with like-minded people. So that would be the first thing that I say, is to reach out to like-minded people, come together and just talk about what the needs are. The second thing I would say is you cannot do this without the students. So reach out to your students as well. Students need adult support. They need parental support right now. A lot of them are wicked smart. Like, this new generation they blow my mind at how smart they are, but they may need assistance with how to protest properly, and when I say properly, I mean talking about how do you apply pressure. I'm not trying to try to do identity politics, but some of them have never done this before, and a lot of us parents, this isn't our first rodeo. So joining together with the students is vastly important, and always keeping the students' voice at the center is extremely important, because ultimately it's their lives that's being affected. They're the ones that are going to see the greatest consequences. And so they're the ones with the solution. So making a alliance with your students, it's actually the ultimate in parenting, right? That's what we should be doing anyway, is joining together with our students and supporting our students. That is of the utmost importance. And then lastly, if people want to start a group and they don't know how to reach out to people, how do you get people to you? You can always call J-PEAR, and we've got strategies for you on how to do exactly that. Social media is an important tool that you can use. And in fact, most of the parents at J-PEAR came to us through social media. It's a very important tool you can use. You can use events in your area. You can create events and you can bring together like-minded people, but it's all about unity, solidarity, and supporting one another is really what this is about. Sometimes you may need to reach the other school districts. If you're in a very rural area, that's okay too.
Talk a little bit about the importance of centering also the voices of communities of color and parents of color, students of color. And my kids are out of school, they're adults, but as a parent, when they were in school, and I wanted to have an impact, um, I struggled with the idea of, but can I just, say what I want to say? And so talk about the importance of centering the voices of leaders of color, parents, students, whoever they are.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you brought that up because it is the most important thing if you're talking about equity and anti-racism. That charge must be led by parents and students and families of color because they are the recipients of the negativity of racism and inequity. So when I do my trainings, I usually use an analogy that I think a lot of people can relate to, and I'll give it to you here now. You know how when you're walking on the street and you get to the curb, you get to the end of the block, and the curb dips down. I call it a curb cut because it looks like part of the curb is cut out. We all use that, right? Like if you've ever had children and you had a stroller, you use that and you don't have to navigate the curb. If you ride a bike, rag by riders or what have you, you use that curb cut to go safely from one end of the block to the other. Every single, person has used that curb cut, but that curb cut wasn't created for us. That curb cut was created as a part of the American Disabilities Act. And so what happened is that people with mobility issues were put at the center. And one of their biggest issues was navigating the curb. So that was paid attention to, and their voices were amplified. And now we have curb cuts, but it benefited all of us. That is what it looks like when you're working towards equity. You center the voices of those with the greatest barriers, those that are most affected, because the solutions are going to come from there. When you don't come from those communities, you have blind spots. There are things that you can't see because you're not living the experience. But when you're living the experience, you can absolutely say what the solution needs to be. And so that is why you need to center the voices of folks from marginalized communities, particularly folks, people of color in this discussion, because it's people of color that are really under attack. And the book bannings is a great example of that, picking two books that are specifically directed at folks of color wasn't an accident, we don't think. So it's inherently important that you center the voices of folks of color and people from marginalized communities. One, so that you can get at the solutions that work best, and two, so that you don't cause any more harm. Because as you can see, this pledge, for example, sounds very innocent, on the surface, and could be something that even if you stand for equity, if you're not following the voices of people of color, you may have signed on to, right? And unknowingly cause great harm. So it's vastly important that communities of color, people of color, and marginalized communities be at the center of this work, which means some people are going to need to take some additional training so that they can learn how to follow people of color, because that's not something that we're taught to do in our society. We're not taught to respect people of color in leadership positions. We're actually taught to center whiteness. And so some folks need to do a little bit of pre-work before they get hard and heavy into anti-racism work. And we can help you with that too. So
What do you see coming down the road in the near future for J-PEAR, for the Johnston School District, and these conversations?
I almost don't want to answer that. Oh my gosh. I can tell you what I hope I see.
Okay,
Um,
we'll go there.
yeah, let's go there. I hope that I see some real meaningful dialogue, some real meaningful changes, and I hope I see the commitment to equity continue in our district. What I honestly think I see coming is a continued battle. I don't think that, especially now that our governor has signed the 1776 pledge, I don't see these school board members denouncing this pledge. Um, you will see students try to have dialogue with the members. One of the members has already said she's going to speak with students. That has not happened yet. So I think what we're going to continue to see is a continued battle that will probably escalate in pressure as we move forward. Particularly with the doubling down of banning our books, and nothing done on the pledge. You're going to continue to see folks gather. You're going to continue to see people speak out. And you're going to continue to see pressure being put on the school board until they do the right thing. I will say that the reconsideration committee on the book banning did come to a decision, and that recommendation that they're going to give on the 13th is to leave the books alone. I appreciate that. They listened to the community, they listened to the students. Teachers came forward with an alternative. These are not books that your students have to read. You can pick other books. And so I think what's you're actually going to see, if people look closely, you'll find that up until now, at least, parents of color and students of color have been supporting our district. And so by signing that pledge, what you're really doing is going against everything that our district had been doing. So in the near future, on the 13th, you'll see parents and students supporting the reconsideration committee's decision and supporting our superintendent's decision to leave the books intact. A lot of people think we're fighting our district. We're not necessarily fighting the whole district. We're in support of those decisions. We're just, not in support of harming our students and our families. As for J-PEAR, we continue to grow. We are now what started as, a volunteer type thing we thought would only last the summer while we put together the proposal, has now basically become a full-time job for us. We're not getting paid for it, but we're working full-time hours. As more people join, you will see us start to put together some trainings, because as people come to us, like a lot of people, they need some prerequisites first. So you'll start to see some trainings come out from J-PEAR so that people can get up to speed. And that can be anybody that wants to take these trainings. You'll start to see us, at school board meetings. You'll start to see us in the community. You'll start to see us at city council, because really this issue is community wide. We love our community and we want our community to do better. So you're just going to actually see us grow and see us continue to do the work that we've been doing, and start to do some education as well, and collaboration with other districts.
Thank you, Luana Nelson-Brown. Thank you for your leadership on this and for all the work that you do in this, and your also paid work as well. You are a true leader in our communities, and just very grateful for that. And I wish you all the best in the work that you are doing. Thank you to everybody who is with us on What's Happening, whether you are with us live or watching the recording. We're grateful that you are giving some time to listen in on this conversation. It is a critically important subject. And Luana, I hope you'll come back and talk with me about this or another subject that we come up with.
Yeah. Anytime you ask, I'm going to come.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for now, I usually conclude these conversations with just suggesting to people that if you are not registered to vote, please do register to vote. If you are already registered to vote, help somebody else register. It is important in our democracy that everybody has a say and uses that say in the voting process. And for now, if you will stay safe and take care and be well, have a great week. Thank you, everyone.